This is a fascinating one because there's been debate about privatisation of the NHS for as long as I've worked in the NHS. The reality is, and this goes all the way back to the heart of it, so the NHS is not one organisation, it's 22,500 organisations. 20 odd years ago, every single GP practice is privately owned. So there's a massive part of the NHS that is already privately owned, and people don't seem to understand that. So when I hear privatisation, to a certain extent, it's already underway. However, I'm going to caveat that massively. We have in the UK the ability for somebody to have an accident and go to A&E and be treated, which is fundamentally different to the US. They would leave you dying in the reception area. Now, my personal experience with the NHS over the last few years, there's no denying it's getting harder to get a service. It's incredibly difficult to navigate, and I know the system. Am I in agreement with privatisation? No, but the reality is we better start using third parties a little more efficiently to manage to deliver this service. Because right now, primary and secondary care are on their arse. We've got nurses who are going on strike. You know, I spent the weekend with a mate who's a nurse. They're earning £16.50 in an A&E dealing with, I mean, stuff that shouldn't be going to A&E. So you've got people who are rolling in with a cough or a rash because here's the news, they can't get a doctor's appointment. It goes back to the heart of this. There is a need to really sort out the basics. People talk to me about AI and RPA, robotic process automation, but the reality is just serve people up a fucking appointment and get the absolute basics right before we all start getting excited that robots are going to replace us. We are not in that place. I feel incredibly passionate about the NHS, and I think anybody who's worked in it probably does. And I've said this hundreds of times before, but I know I'll go back and work in the NHS again. You know, it was designed 70 odd years ago for a population that did not live as long as we live. It is wildly underfunded compared to other European countries. And the reality is it's not just creaking at the seams, you know, and I've used this statement before, it's bankrupt and some. So we've got to do something about it. The important point I will also make on the NHS is social care needs funding. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, or you're robbing Paul and robbing Peter at the minute. The reality is we have got to get that properly funded. So I don't think privatisation is the talking point. I think fixing the basics is. I think if people understood just how many bank staff, temporary staff, were put in place to do the absolute basics, you could argue a lot of it's already privatised, but it's the wrong argument. Let's get the basics sorted.